Hey guys, today we want to take a quick look at the characters in the play and then the plot structure of a Shakespearean tragedy. So this is sort of complex in some ways, in that it's probably different from things that you've looked at before or learned before, especially in terms of plot structure. But before we get to that, let's try to break down who is who in this play. I think this sheet is going to be helpful for you to keep handy, just so you can keep track of who's on whose team. So the play starts with our two central characters. You've got Romeo. He's going to be our tragic hero. And Juliet can also be considered a tragic hero, although because this is an old play, it's more based in the masculine, and so we sort of follow him. All right. This splits down the middle here, where everybody on Romeo's side is going to be a Montague. So here's his parents, Lord and Lady Montague. Down here is Benvolio. Benvolio is like his best friend, but also is actually biologically his cousin, so that is important. Then you've got his servant, Balthazar. So Romeo's from a really rich family, so he gets to have a servant. So this dude is with him all the time. They're not necessarily friends, but they're close because he hangs out with him all the time because he serves him. Okay, so you've got Balthazar, you've got Benvolio, who is his cousin, and then you have his parents, Lord and Lady Montague. His parents are pretty cool for the time period. When we meet Romeo, he's going through some emotional stuff. We would call it depression today. And his parents are actually really worried about him and just wanting to know how to help him. Then you got this guy. Now here's where it gets complicated. This guy's name is Mercutio. He's hilarious. He loves attention. You'll see quite a bit of him coming up very shortly. But he's not a Montague. In fact, he's related to this guy, the prince. So this guy's the most powerful guy in Verona. You can think of him as like a chief of police if that helps. But he's really the prince of Verona. And so Mercutio is actually royalty, which becomes important later in the play. However, if Mercutio is forced to choose sides between the Montagues and the Capulets, he's going to choose the Montagues every time. He is like family to the Montagues, and he's like really close with Romeo. Okay? So that's that side. Oh, one more person. You got this guy, Friar Lawrence. He's the priest. He is a confidant to Romeo. You want to think of him like a really cool uncle, sort of a role model, somebody that Romeo will go to when he feels like he can't go to his parents. And so Friar Lawrence is going to be important in that. Okay, so that's that side. Now, on this side, you got Juliet. Now, she's a Capulet, so here are her parents. And then you have her cousin Tybalt. Then you've got the nurse. Now, the nurse is to Juliet as the friar was to Romeo. Really, so like she is the servant, but is like a confidant for her, a friend for her, like a cool aunt. And then the nurse, because the Capulets are so rich, the nurse who is employed by the Capulets actually has a servant of her own, and that's this guy, Peter. He has a really small role, but that's who he is. Then you have this dude, Paris, who is also related to the prince, so he's royalty. Paris wants to marry Juliet. Juliet is not in love with Paris, she's in love with Romeo. But Paris wants to be in an arranged marriage with Juliet through her parents. So that is who everybody is, and that'll just sort of help you as you go through the play and also into this next activity. So moving on down, there's a couple of quick facts that I'm going to give you here. Romeo, Montague, and Juliet are your main characters, Juliet Capulet. The Montague family and the Capulet family are in a major feud and hate each other, and they've been in this feud for hundreds of years, and they probably don't even remember really why at this point. Romeo can be considered the tragic hero of the play. Romeo and Juliet kill themselves at the end of the play, and 4 other characters die before they do. So here's the challenge. You want to write your own version of the play in these blank boxes in the 3rd column. But you want to base that, of course, on the info pick that we just looked at, and also these clues about what will happen in each act. So incorporate as many characters into your version of each act as you can or need, And feel free to use your own background knowledge. However, hold off on researching anything. So we've watched John Green. You know about Romeo and Juliet just because everybody sort of knows something about Romeo and Juliet. And we've done the prologue. So just use that body of knowledge. And of course, if you've watched the movie or you've read it before, you know some more. So that's fine. But just use your current body of knowledge to create your version. I'm not as interested in you being right, like accurate to the play, as I am in you demonstrating that you understand what's happening in each of the acts based on the information I give you here. So for instance, let's just go through this. In Act 1 of a Shakespearean tragedy, you learn the setting, the characters are developed, and a conflict is introduced. Okay? Another way to look at this is called the anticipation stage. So the tragic hero gets it into his or her head that something's missing and they want it. This might be power, fame, a specific love interest, or something else, but the protagonist has their motivation for the disaster and dominoes are about to fall. So over here in your version, tell me where we are, tell me who the main characters are, and what you think the main conflict is at the beginning of the play. If you want to be a super cool kid and get a bonus, tell me what it is that Romeo feels like he's missing at the very beginning of the play. So just write a couple sentences, then answer those questions. You could pause me now and do it right now, and then come back and I'll explain Act 2. As you look at Act 2, this is going to be the rising action. So this one says the action of this act leads the audience to the climax. It's common for complications to arise or for the protagonist to encounter obstacles. So this lady calls it the dream stage. The tragic hero sets out on their path to obtain their MacGuffin, and you can look that up, but it's like the thing that they think that they need and it'll solve everything. Something occurs that tells the reader that this is a no turning back situation, and things start to go strangely well for the protagonist. He might be well on his way down the path of evil, but no one is calling him out on it, and no one can stop him, so he proceeds further into the depths. So, let's see if I can get my lights to go back on here. Sorry about that. Okay, so, basically, I want to know what starts to go really well for Romeo, and how would that thing that goes really well, how would it also cause complications? So for instance, if you're a smart person, you're probably going to be like, oh, Romeo meets Juliet or falls in love with Juliet. Okay, fine, that's good and it's going really well. But this thing tells us that it's going to cause complications to arise. So can you think and explain in the box how that would cause complications to arise? So again, good idea to just pause me here, throw your couple of sentences in there, and then press play again, and I'll explain the next act. Okay, Act 3 is the climax. So this is going to be the turning point of the play. It's characterized by the highest amount of suspense. So right about here is where the tragic hero hits his first roadblocks. They might be small annoyances, but in dealing with them, the protagonist commits additional dark acts that seal his fate and alert the reader that the only way this can end is badly. All right, let me give you a big hint here. In Act 3, people die, and they're not Romeo, and they're not Juliet. So if you go back up to the character thing, maybe take a guess. Who do you think dies in Act 3 that would mess everything up for Romeo and Juliet? So think about that. Look at what you wrote in Act 2, and then try to tie it together coming into a climax in Act 3. So who could die in Act 3 that would mess this whole deal up and make everything horrible? All right, pause me, do the work, and then come back. In Act 4, you have the falling action. So this is the opposite, obviously, of rising action. In the falling action, the story is coming to an end, and any unknown details or plot twists are revealed and wrapped up. So the tragic hero's plan is unraveling, and he can sense that an opposing force or fate is closing in. He's increasingly paranoid and living in fear of what's to come. All right, so depending on what you did in Acts 1, 2, and 3, think about what would make it a nightmare stage. This is a man who's in love with somebody he's not supposed to be in love with. We know they die at the end, but that's probably Act 5, so don't use it here. We know that something horrible happened in Act 3. Look at what you put there. What could cause this to continue to unravel? What would make it worse and worse? So you're going to add a complication to whatever you said happened in Act 3. So again, this is tough. You've got to think creatively here, and remember, you don't have to be accurate to the play. You just have to be accurate to what would happen in an act of a play this way. So see what you can come up with, type it in, pause me, and then come back for the last act. Okay, the last act is Act 5. This fancy word is a pretty cool one to know. It's denouement, And really it just means the resolution, but if you want to say words in French and sound really smart, you can. This is the final outcome of the drama. Here the author's tone, we'll put an apostrophe in there. The author's tone about his or her subject matter is revealed, and sometimes a moral or lesson is learned. Our protagonist breathes his last, whether at the hands of his enemies or due to some final act of violence. Either way, his death isn't mourned much, and the darkness that surrounded him dissipates, and there is much rejoicing. In a way, tragedy is a much more cynical version of rebirth, or the flip side of the overcoming the monster story, since most monsters follow this trajectory. All right, and then she gives you some classic examples there. Here's the thing. You know what happens at the end of this play, so you can use the prologue. You know who dies, you know how they die, and you know what happens after their death. So this one actually should be easy, and it should be accurate to the play because I know that you have the background knowledge to do it well. So fill that out, and then you're done. Now, keep that with you, especially the character page, because then we can compare how accurate you are, and you can use the character page throughout the play. All right, thank you very much.